Our panelists today are Brett Myers, Jessica Johnson, and Jason Klootwyk. Brett Myers is the Director of Human Resources and Development for MKC in Mountain Ridge, Kansas. Brett came to MKC in 2009 and is responsible for managing the HR department and focuses on employee development at MKC. He received a bachelor's degree in marketing from Fort Hays State University. He grew up in the grain elevator business and first managed a full-service grain, feed, and agronomy location in Galva, Kansas. Prior to joining MKC, Brett worked for Farmland Industries in Kansas City, was the Executive Vice President for the Kansas Association of Wheat Growers, and served as the Regional Business Manager for Westbred LLC. Jessica Johnson is the Talent Acquisition Manager at Lansing Trade Group, an entrepreneurial company largely focused on the movement of physical commodities. Jessica has over 12 years of experience in human resources operations and talent acquisition from Farmers Insurance Group and Thermo Fisher Scientific. She graduated with a BA from Iowa State University and also holds a professional in human resources certification. Jason is responsible for U.S. grain assets, tributary to the Mississippi and Ohio River basins for Bunge North America. He joined Bunge in 1998 as manager trainee at the river terminal in Albany, Illinois. Since then, Jason has held several different management positions with Bunge. In 2012, he transferred to the company's St. Louis office to manage the company's river and rail terminals, a position he currently holds. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree from Iowa State University in 1998. He also is a past chairman of the Indiana Grain and Feed Association and currently is a member of the NGFA Country Elevator Committee. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, Brett, Jessica, and Jason. My name is Katie Squibb. I am currently at West Central Cooperative in Ralston, Iowa. I've been with the company for 7 years, and I am in charge of recruiting and hiring for all 26 of our locations. Now, we all know how difficult it can be to recruit and retain employees, so our goal today is to showcase your role in the hiring of good employees and keeping those employees on board. So with that being said, where do you guys look for good candidates, or how do you attract them to your business?
Well, this is the easy part, isn't it, Katie? Okay. The easy part is having openings. The hard part's finding the employees. And probably the two major things we do at MKC is we've had to start looking for passive employees, or passive candidates. And everybody knows what a passive candidate is. That's somebody that already currently has a job. In central Kansas, where we have most of our locations, close to 45 locations, the unemployment rate's 3.6%. And about 0.6% of those really want to work. So we're working with very few employees. And so what we've done is gone back to the last 5 years, pulled out applicants from the last 5 years, and they may be working for you guys, some of you. And we're going to steal them. And that's about the only thing we can do is go out and steal good employees. Second thing we do is employee referrals. We have a $1,500 employee referral. We have spent around $150,000 in the last 9 years paid out to our employees for referrals. And this has worked very, very well for us. And we'll continue to do those two programs in the near future.
I would second that our number one source of hires is employer referrals. This year, a third of our hires have been from the employer referral program. Similar in nature, we offer a $1,000 employer referral program. If your referral has made it to the 90-day mark, you get half of that. Once after 1 year, they get the other half of that. In terms of other candidates, it really depends on whether we are targeting our corporate offices and back office support and operations and merchandisers, or whether we're targeting our assets in the field. We've had to get a little bit creative with the field locations because they are rural. There are fewer candidate population there. We've gone through some staffing agencies and used those to source for seasonal candidates to come on board and kind of do that try before you buy and make sure it's a good fit on both ends. We've also partnered up with some state-run programs to provide those seasonal employees. So it's kind of a win-win on both sides, where we're giving back to the state and allowing some people that maybe wouldn't normally have been selected for those roles to come in and work in the asset and prove themselves. From the corporate offices, a big focus, other than the employee referrals, is our campus recruiting efforts. 50% of our merchandisers in training are hired straight out of college and brought into Lansing into the merchandiser and training program.
I guess the only thing I would add to that from our perspective is we tend to, like Brett was saying, to go after the employee that's working somewhere else. I think we tend to focus that more fairly selectively, more an hourly skill set. What Jessica was mentioning with regards to the professional group, we've actually had to massively broaden the program simply because of the issue of everyone's desire to go back home. It seems like that has been a huge change, and so our target has been shifted the last few years to more about fit and less about maybe acumen and experience. And so we'll go after the business schools. This fall, we're going to go to 30 universities that will include engineering colleges at those universities, things that are fairly non-traditional in the ag field, because I think we've learned the last few years that, not to simplify the business, but we can teach them the X's and the O's about the ag piece. Yeah, it's great to have that background, but we've switched to being more about fit and valuing the same things that we value as an organization. We've had much better luck with that. But the spread out piece is simply because there's going to come a time when that employee is going to want to go home regardless of what they tell you that day in the interview. And it's different for everybody. It might be living in the town they grow up in. It might be within the driving distance. They just might need to be in the same state. But we were joking before we got out here about what schools we recruit from, and there's some that clearly have an X on it because everyone from that school is going to go back to that state, and if you don't have any assets in that state, there's no point in hiring that employee to begin with, given the low retention expectation with today's college grad. That's just part of the facts, and that's a significant change versus when we graduated. I mean, you're expected to relocate, you're expected to go after opportunities. They'll do that now, but I think there's a sense that once they've kind of conquered the world and come around, they're going to go back home. And you need to be prepared for that and have a plan for that.
In mirroring that as well, we have started to revamp a little bit of our campus recruiting strategy, where we're going to start targeting schools that are closer to some of our asset locations, knowing that for the first year or two that those candidates or employees will relocate, but then when they're ready to go home or they're thinking that they want to go back somewhere, that hopefully they have a home within one of our assets, and so we're retaining that employee and being able to use their training and skill set for their first 2 years for that asset.
In regards to the marketing that you talked about, have any of you done anything like sign-on bonus? You talked about referral bonus, but what about sign-on bonus, job fairs, any other unique ways that you've tried to get a candidate to your business?
We do a sign-on bonus for our merchandisers in training. It's more of an incentive to get them to commit. A lot of times we'll have those offer letters out in October and November for those people to start after graduation the following year. So that sign-on bonus is available to them if they commit by an X date to come to Lansing.
We do the same thing, but one of the things that we've also tried to increase dramatically is the number of interns. There's a huge difference in the amount of qualified interns in the trade. Doesn't matter if you're focused on commercial trading or in operations. They will have a job offer by the time they are done with that summer if they're any good at all. And so the traditional method of waiting, if it's a DC or a MA grad, and doing the job fairs and those kinds of things in the fall, when most of your major ag schools do them, it's simply too late. The cream of the crop, if that's your target at all, is gone. And most of even the middle of the packers, if they're a hard worker and they did well at their internship that summer, probably have an offer on the table. And so we do two things along the same lines. Is we'll go aggressively after an intern. If they've worked for us and done well, they should be completing that internship with an offer from Bunge on the table, and that will almost always include now some kind of signing bonus that frankly has an incentive based on time. They're not allowed just to sit on it, and we've had a lot of success with that. It's a little more money up front, but it lets people know you're serious and you're aggressive, and I think that's attractive to an element of the population right now.
We've actually taken it a step further with our interns, and we've actually upped our intern program quite considerably, but we do the same thing. We'll give a sign-on bonus at the end of the summer. We'll give them half of it when they sign on, and then we're going to give them the other half when they come to work in May. And here a couple years ago, I had one young man that called me up a couple weeks before he's supposed to start and said, "Brett, I took a job somewhere else." I said, "I understand. Of course, you got to pay me back $1,000. And he goes, "I understand that also." So what we did was took it a step further, because what happens with so many of our interns, especially the 3 or 4 or 5, we there's no doubt we look at K-State because that's where we're based around. We find out that you take those 3 or 4 or 5 good interns, and what happens when they go back to school? You lose contact with them. So we've actually started another 9-month internship program with them right there in Manhattan. They all go out and get jobs anyway, whether it's at the university or it's at Burger King or Sonic or doing whatever. We may as well keep them working for us. So we take 3 or 4 of the top interns and put them on for another 9 months. We've got some locations around Manhattan. They may be doing some work there, but they're mostly doing special projects, probably projects that they were working on during the summer anyway. And we've actually now, this will be our first full year. Last year we hired 4 of those full-time. When they started on day 1 for their full-time job in May, they were ready to go. I mean, they had already been onboarded. They knew our company culture. This isn't a cheap program. We've got a person, we've got office space up there. We've also took some of our vendor partners, and about 4 or 5 of them that are helping fund this. Again, it's not a cheap program, but we found out that if we can keep those interns in our lap for those 9 months, they're less likely to go out and look for another job. And it's worked out very well for us.
All right. At what point in the difficult process of hiring do you use a recruiter, or does your company even use a recruiter?
Well, we have a recruiting department, but if you're speaking specifically to headhunters,
Yep.
Yes, that happens quite a bit. And typically what pushes the envelope is there's a specific skill set or a location that we're just having an almost impossible time placing someone, and at that point you have to go to outside resources. Typically we prefer, obviously, everybody avoid the cost and cover internally, but it's there, it provides a service, and we've actually had pretty good success doing that, but it tends to be more specialized.
I would agree with that. We always try to hire in-house first if we can, but if there is a specialized skill set, or if it's a confidential search where we're not going to be advertising that we are posting for that position, then we may use an outside resource. Again, in some of our rural locations, we do use not necessarily a professional headhunter, but a staffing agency to try to generate some of that hourly talent to come into the organization versus taking up the manager's time with trying to get through that interview process with those candidates.
And we do the same. We'll use a recruiter. We call them headhunters back home, but they're recruiters. When I first started 6 years ago, we had contracts with a number of them. I canceled every one of them and started over because they were all different. I wanted them on my standards, not theirs. And if you get a good recruiter, they're worth their money. But if you get one that all they're going to do is just send you names and see how many you can throw on the wall and how many of them stick, then it's not worth it. So we're very picky who we work with. We've been burned a time or two. It seems like a lot of these young people, especially out of school, or somebody that's even looking for a job, that's the first people they go to is they get their name signed up with a headhunter, and that can get in your way sometimes. So we're just very picky who we use. And she mentioned staffing companies. We've tried some of those staffing companies. We just put in our first train loader this year and went through our first summer taking wheat into that train loader. we had four, or we actually had 6 guys from a staffing company there one day that I happened to be there giving some people a tour. We lost 4 of them that day. They just completely walked off the job. And our managers couldn't figure out why these staffing companies aren't working. And I say, if they were that good to begin with, they'd have a job. And there's a reason they don't have jobs, full-time jobs. So we try and stay away from the team employment type places as much as we can.
So once you get a candidate hired, what is your onboarding process or new hire orientation process to make that person feel welcome?
I can start with that one. It depends, again, whether it's corporate office or in the field. In our corporate office, their first day, they come in to do their new hire paperwork, go through the orientation benefits with the Human Resources Department, and then we give them a tour of the facility to try to introduce them to as many people as possible. Obviously, it's overwhelming on your first day when you are meeting that many people. So in addition to that, what we've started doing is, and this is easier because we're a smaller company, is a new hire announcement. So once a week with every new employee that started, whether they're in another state or what level of position, we've been sending out a new hire announcement with pictures of the employee to try to make them feel welcome, but then also to help our current staff recognize them as they're coming down the hall, or they see a new face in the hall and they can say hi and call them by name. In the field, when a new employee starts, the managers usually handle most of that orientation, but leave that open door with a contact to Human Resources that they can call any of us in that department and ask questions or help get enrolled in benefits or whatnot.
Ours depends on the position. We do, as she said, we do fairly the same thing. It used to be we started as most of you I'm sure are very conscious of safety. We used to start the first day with safety. Can you imagine coming to your very first day of work and you sit through all day of safety training? So we kind of switched that around and went to second day is safety training. You get to sit through the whole second day of safety training, but the first day is orientation. We've got a lot of we get most of our senior managers involved to spend a little time with them. We actually have a committee set up that comes in and spends an hour and a half and just goes through the MKC way, who we are, what we do, what our culture is. And then from there, again, depending on the position, our sales orientation, depending on their type of sales, we won't put anybody out in the field probably for a year. They'll spend 6 months spending half their time in sales, half their time in operations before they actually start doing any sales at all. Operations type people, managers, we've got another year-long program for the most part that there's a checklist of things they need to learn before we just turn them loose completely. Hourly people, it's another whole story. There's your job, go do it almost. And some managers do a much better job than others, but not as good as we should do.
I think we're very similar to what Jessica described at Lansing. The one thing we've seen change is because more and more of our employees don't have an ag background, yet they're interacting daily with people in the field in that sector, making decisions around commodities. They don't even know what they look like. We've had to go back and introduce a farm-to-table program is what we call it, and it's essentially an agricultural 101 training for those that don't have that background. And it has been hugely successful. It'd be easy to dismiss something like that in being in the trade or in the business. But even people that come from those backgrounds are now signing up for those courses inside of our organization because they feel like it has things to offer. We'll get into the weeds on soybean processing, for example, and corn milling, some of the other things that we're into, not just merchandising and shipping grain. So those post-employment days, those first 6 to 12 months, are critical for getting employees off to the right start. There's such a thirst for knowledge about the organization and jobs beyond what they're doing that we've really felt a lot of pressure to acquiesce to that, and it's paid big dividends.
Great. So do you guys think that there's value between the new hire orientation process and making them feel welcome to the company and keeping them on board for a career with you?
I absolutely think so. You have to. I mean, that's table stakes anymore. If you're not doing that, it's a weakness, and you're exposing yourself to someone else that will. additionally to that, we spend a lot of time here talking about orientation and the onboarding. We do offer mentoring and coaching opportunities, and that's been well received on both sides of it. We have a lot of people that want that, the desire, the need for a coach or a mentor. Then we've got a whole bunch of people in the organization that want to be it, that have been around and been through the battles and see the opportunity to take a new person under the wing and develop them. But then further on, you have to have a plan for your A and B employees for their further development. Because they expect it, and they're going to go somewhere that's going to provide them those opportunities, it feels like.
Sure, and definitely is important. And when I was speaking before, more high level, just that orientation day one, but just the ongoing onboarding piece of it, I think, is probably what's best for the employee. Specifically in our merchandiser and training position, and going back to what Jason said, is that we have people in that program who don't have the ag background. So it's not only teaching them that piece of it, but also teaching them our culture. And so specifically with like our MITs or merchandisers in training, they come in, they actually do our new hire orientation day one, but then 3-week classroom type training and then field training where they're going out and looking at different assets or facilities, and then the rotations within Lansing itself. So they're going to spend 6 months in one physical location, whether that's their corporate office in Kansas City or whether that is in the field, and then switch that up so they're getting a really well-rounded experience. And I think that kind of just growing up with the company and taking that year-long process to learn the culture and learn the organization helps retain those employees.
Jason mentioned mentors, and we do. Our A employees all have a mentor. They're all over the company. It's usually a mentor that's quite a ways away, maybe not even in their department. It's mainly just to go once every month or 2 months, go out to lunch with them and see how they're doing, what they're learning, see if there's any issues that we're missing. That's been a great opportunity for us to have those mentors. I get together then with those mentors and have them report back to me just to see how things are going and see if there's any issues we're missing. We are going to start a new buddy system, and I call it a buddy system because it's not really a mentor system, but it'll be somebody, especially for the hourly employee, that guy that's working out in the elevator. We want to buddy him up with somebody that he's learning that job from, and we're going to see how that goes for us.
So once they're in the field and past the onboarding, new hire orientation process, and they're doing the job day to day, how do you provide feedback to them? Do you do one-on-ones? Do you do performance evaluations? Or how do you coach them to do better within their job duties?
Well, the one thing that we've started doing every 2 years is engagement surveys with our employees, see how engaged our employees are. We were very pleased this last one we did last February that about 95 of our employees understood what their job was and how it contributed to the company. What we were probably ranked lowest on, two things, which I'm sure everybody in here would be the same way. Number one was pay. Nobody ever thinks they're getting enough money. And number two is communication. And I was telling these guys before we started, what I've got to do over the next 2 months is I've got to hit every one of our managers, and we're going to talk on how to do a crucial conversation. Should be a simple thing. Should be pretty easy to have a crucial conversation with your employee, but our managers struggle with that so heavily. And again, a crucial conversation is not writing them up. That's always been the big thing, is I'm getting written up and it's going in my personnel file and it's going to be there for the rest of my life. And no, you ought to have a lot of crucial conversations in your employee file. It should be just about, was there a mistake? Was it about development? Anything that you've talked about with that employee ought to go into their file just so month, 2 months, 2 years later, you can go back and see if that conversation, if you both agreed on that conversation and what you talked about. And it's as simple as that. So that's going to be what I'm going to be doing the next 2 months, is teaching our managers how to do a crucial conversation and then also how to document that crucial conversation.
Feedback for us is going to be, again, dependent on the position. In our formalized programs, we'd have that review process at 3 months, 9 months, 1 year, and then move into the annual yearly review process. In the field, it's just much more of a day-to-day interaction. You know, you're working side by side, and if something's going great or not going that great, then you're going to have that conversation on the spot. And for more of our professional employees, that's weekly or biweekly one-on-ones with your manager, and biweekly or monthly team meetings with your manager as well.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same for us. It's an annual review process with a mid-year checkpoint on how things are going. Laughing a little bit at Brett that we do the same thing with regards to the survey, and it really shines a light from a management perspective and does highlight that a majority of the managers really struggle with those difficult conversations, and they're never easy, but that's become the focus point for us, I think, is getting that feedback passed on. And frankly, this newer employee will even have to adapt off that process because they have to have feedback more frequently. Doing it once or twice a year won't cut it. They need more constant feedback on how things are going, how they're performing, both good and the bad. If you won't do that, they'll find someone that will. They're simply used to that. The 25, 26-year-old, has had that kind of constant feedback since they were 6 years old playing soccer. That's the way the group is now, and we've had to adjust that mindset because it's absolutely critical that you're constantly providing feedback. You have to do it.
Thanks. What are some other ways that you maybe keep the employees motivated or engaged, not just giving performance appraisals or those crucial conversations? Are there any perks or any other ways that you motivate them and keep them going every day?
Well, the big thing inside Bunge right now is the debate about at-risk pay, and more of it becoming variable, including all the way to the hourly employees. And that is a huge shift in the trade, or at least especially for us. I think as a bigger organization, we've kind of operated one way for forever, but more and more to get engagement and to provide an incentive and keep people on track with goals is to provide a reward factor for it, and the best employees rise to the top and respond to that, but it gets the buy-in. It certainly gets when you're looking at key performance indicators and efficiencies, providing that incentive. I was listening to the last speaker talk about buy-in, and if you have a group of hourly employees that have no incentive for that grain dryer to run better than it is, no financial incentive, they're probably not going to do it. Or at least they're not going to do it when you walk away. But if they know that there's a performance target on the end of it that will add an extra $500 for them at the end of the year or something, that is really gaining a lot of traction right now, and basically via incentives. The rest of the organization, obviously operates that way, but the big shift for us is pushing that out more into the hourly ranks.
I think a lot of what engages and motivates our employees at Lansing is really around our culture. First of all, having that entrepreneurial culture, and we really want our employees to come up with ideas, and then we act on those ideas. And I think that really does motivate the employees. I believe I heard that a third of our business development last year actually came from ideas from the floor. So we're encouraging our employees to come forward with business propositions or ideas, and then we're acting on those. The second is our pay-for-performance culture, and the employees know that if they are high performers, that they're going to be rewarded or compensated for that with their year-end bonus. And then lastly is just kind of that family orientation piece in terms of social gatherings that we have. So we spend a lot of time together inside of work, but then we spend a lot of time together outside of work. And I think that's more for our headquarters, and that's unfortunate. But I have heard from our other offices in the field that they do those types of social gatherings outside of work. But we have a socials committee that puts together quarterly events. Tomorrow is the quarterly event where we're going to a driving range, Topgolf, and we've rented that out, and all the employees are going to go and do that together. And I think that just helps kind of, again, engage the employee and make them proud of where they work and want to come back every day.
That's something we're struggling very hard with right now. I hate this time of year. We just finished up with a horrible spring season that lasted forever. It never got started, and then it lasted forever. And then we got right into wheat harvest. And, we had it down probably to about 2 openings here a couple of weeks ago, and I think we're probably up to 10 or 12 right now. If you can keep employees busy, they aren't out looking for new jobs. But we've got to the point now where things have slowed down just a little bit, and they just went through a horrible season. I mean, we tell our employees up front, our hourly employees, that they will probably work, on average, 500 hours overtime a year. I just did a study of our overtime hours, and we had a number of them that worked 800 to 900 hours of overtime per year. They make very good money. But on the other hand, we're trying to tell our employees that we're very family-oriented, that, boy, if you got little Johnny that's in kindergarten and every little kindergartner's got 500 little parent shows they put on during the year, that no matter how busy we are, we're going to let you go off and go to little Johnny's little show or go to his ball game, and no matter what we're doing. But to be able to do that, you've got to overstaff. And when you're putting in 700, 800, 900 hours overtime a year, it's tough to do, to let them off, or for them to get the time. So sometimes we talk out of both sides of our mouth. We tell our employees we're a very family-oriented company, that we really believe in that, but then to give them that time off to go do. So motivation right now this time of year is something we're struggling mightily with.
All right, so we all know that money talks and is an extra perk. What about training, education to help them further their career within your company?
We offer a lot of training. In fact, I just looked it up last week, and for a company our size, we've got 350 employees. We spend about $500,000 a year on training, which a lot of larger companies, that's not a lot, but for us, that's a lot of money. The one thing we did offer, we just started a new program 2 years ago, is a tuition reimbursement program. We will offer employees up to $4,000 a year, and remember, it's a reimbursement. We don't give them the $4,000 up front. They've got to pay for it themselves, finish the classes, come back to me. If their supervisor and I sign off of it, we start reimbursing that over the next 12 months. A lot of companies make them sign a contract. Yeah, good luck getting that one back if they leave. It's not worth doing that. So we just do it over a 12-month period. I break it into 12s, pay them each month, and if they leave in 5 months, we just stop paying them. And we've had a good response to it. We've got a lot of people going back to get their bachelor's, a few people getting their master's degree, and it's worked well for us.
We also offer a tuition reimbursement program. It is reimbursement as well, but it is a lump sum reimbursement, payable if you do leave within 1 year. But highly encourage the employees to utilize that resource to better themselves, and whether that's going back to school to get their bachelor's or their master's, or just anything that they feel relevant in the industry, certifications or additional training that's going to make them better at their job, that can be used for any type of continuing ed outside of a degree program as well.
Yeah, same here.
All right. We're quickly approaching our time limit. Any other words or advice that you guys can give the audience on hiring employees, retaining employees?
The one thing we were talking about before we sat down here is just how the market has changed a little bit. Right now with unemployment so low, and even what Jason said, those good, grad candidates or new grads being snapped up, it really is a candidates market. So we're seeing candidates that have several offers at the same time, or declining offers from our organization to go to another company because they can afford to be choosy. And so I think kind of time is of the essence when you are recruiting for an open position. If you have a good candidate, don't drag your feet, because they have another opportunity around the corner. And it's really about, making sure that if they are the right fit to your organization, bringing them in as quickly as possible.
Well, the only thing I always tell our managers, we tried here a few years ago to put a pay scale in. We threw that thing out the window because I tell our managers we're going to pay fair, not equal. Not everybody's going to get paid the same thing for doing the same job. And we're finding that out, that to bring people in, it's almost like recruiting. I'm a big baseball fan. You've seen some of the things that have gone here at the end of the trade deadline, and some of the things people have had to give up. Some of the teams had to give up. Some players, you got players out there that make millions and millions of dollars more than other players, and we're going to find that, I think, when we're recruiting, that we're going to have to, if we got a good talent, we want them into our business, we're going to have to pay for them.
Yep. At this time, we'll open it up to the audience for any questions that you may have.
Outside of your company website, is there any place that you advertise or post jobs that you've had good success? How do you get the word out?
So I do post on Career Builder and Monster. I'm not necessarily a big fan of those. I do it more for just brand awareness so that people see that we are hiring. But then I try to make it a point to put it on our Facebook page, our Twitter page, our LinkedIn page, and continue to try to update those. Once you post it on any of those, Indeed usually scrapes it, and that actually has been a pretty good source for us. It's a free recruiting tool. We don't have the paid subscription for Indeed, but do see a lot of traffic there. But again, a lot of our hiring comes from employee referrals. And for me, too, doing networking, Brett talked about that passive candidate search. So I'm going out on LinkedIn and Facebook and just cold calling or doing a soft contact through email with candidates. They may not always be the right time for them to make the move, but at least I've put our name in the back of their head, and it's something that they're going to continue to think about. Or just had success yesterday. Reached out to someone on LinkedIn. He's not interested, but he forwarded it on to a really qualified candidate who then reached out to me and said, hey, I'd be interested in talking further. So did that answer your question? Okay.
Probably did, but not very well. But that's the way that's the point. That's where we're all at. It takes so much more time than it ever used to. I mean, you used to be able to put an ad in the paper, and heck, who reads a paper anymore? So you don't even put hardly ads in the paper unless it's very, very localized. But it takes so much more time than it used to. And again, I take it back to sports. It's like recruiting people to be on your team.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We do not have a lot. Utilize all those same assets, and social recruiting is becoming a bigger thing all the time. I mean, you have to be on those, on every element of social media. If nothing else, more for brand recognition. But we post a lot of those things to attract candidates, frankly, for other jobs than the posting, because where we actually have had success has been someone's applied for job A online, and you get in, you start looking at the credentials, and they're actually better suited for maybe something somewhere else in the organization that maybe just hadn't met the posting yet that is coming. So we constantly are flooding those sites and pushing the job piece just to see what comes, not necessarily trying to match person A with job A. We've had very little success doing that, but inevitably sometimes you'll get somebody, but it's a challenge. And just like they said, we've had much better luck going after known entities in the business and recruiting via a referral process. Other questions?
Two.
Hello?
There you go.
So I've heard a discussion about when hiring hourly employees, should we start paying more, will we get a better employee if we pay more for an hourly employee? What are y'all's thoughts on that?
So we just went through a massive overhaul inside of our organization, targeted exactly that. And it was more about laying a foundation to attract a better employee. And it works throughout the entire organization. And one of the things that kind of drove me crazy when I got into the job I'm in now is I felt like the managers were held to a certain standard, a certain starting pay, and it didn't really foster creative thinking about recruiting and going after people. And there'd be there'd be kind of an artificial barrier at $15 or $20 an hour, whatever the wage is in your area, but there might be someone that is available that has 15 or 20 years of pretty extensive maintenance experience, but needs $20 an hour maybe to leave the position. And our guys were handcuffed and maybe wouldn't even consider it. And so we did that. Ultimately, it'd be to attract a better employee and retain them. But it was more about just changing the culture inside the organization to let our guys know it's okay. Because a cheap employee is a problem employee, and it will get you every time. It'll get you in the safety piece. It'll get you in reliability. But we did it first to more change the culture and kind of the brand piece. We didn't want to be the cheap date, and I think we were viewed as that for a while. But ultimately, it's to attract a higher caliber employee, and I think we're already seeing that happen.
And we've also got to the point, if you find a good employee, hire them. Whether you've got a spot open or not, if you know that they're going to fit in your culture, you know that they're your guy or gal, hire them. Doesn't matter whether you have a position or not. It's going to cost you a little more, but I guarantee you within a few months or a few weeks, you'll wish you had 2 or 3 more of them.
Yep, I agree. We have a general range that we try to stick within, but we see differences, again, based on quality. If you have the right person and you need to pay them $2 more an hour to bring them in, then we'll do it to make sure we get the right talent in the organization.
All right, we had another question over there.
I have a question for maybe is more for Jessica and Brett and possibly you, Katie, as opposed to Jason. How do you attract, say, grain merchants or, I'm not talking like maybe on a local level people for the hourly type jobs, but just merchants to your firms as opposed to the Bunges and the Cargills and the ones that, have 30,000 employees and positions that they could, golden carrot type thing, if you catch my drift.
I'll address that because we just went through it. We've had we're not a humongous company. We're a pretty good-sized co-op. We handle around 50 million bushel of grain a year, and I always have these young students always come up to me, and I ask them what do they want to do. Oh, I want to be a merchandiser. That's always the pretty job. They want to be merchandisers. And I said, for a number of years, and I don't know how many years, we've had one guy do that. And now we put in our first train loader, and we've hired a couple more. So to answer your question, we paid them a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. We also are a little bit smaller organization as compared to Bunge. And really a lot of that is twofold. One is we've realized because our culture is a little bit different than maybe some of our major competitors. That's why we really focus on bringing half of our merchandisers in from the MIT program and grooming them within Lansing's culture, but selling them and then also selling, the experienced trader on coming into Lansing. It really just comes back to our culture piece and being a smaller organization and not having a lot of that bureaucracy and red tape that we have to go through. We're very flexible. We're very nimble. If there's an idea or something that you see that could add value to the business, we're going to go for it. And so the really highly entrepreneurial people enjoy that. They like it. They like the autonomy of owning the risk and, being held accountable if that, it's a bad decision. But those are the type of people I think that are attracted to our organization, and that's how we try to sell them on it.
That's probably the type of people you want.
It is the type of people we want. Yeah, absolutely, is the highly entrepreneurial. But that I think that is the selling point that differentiates us from a larger organization and how we're able to attract good talent to come into Lansing.
All right. Any other questions?
Oh, we got one over there.
Okay, one more.
Has it been more effective? Have you guys seen to give a one-time large lump sum bonus at the end of the year, or several smaller ones throughout the year?
We do one lump sum at the end of the year. I don't know that we've looked at doing smaller ones. I don't know that we are opposed to doing spot bonuses for rewarding something that's above and beyond, but the focus would be that variable comp piece, looking at that last year's performance.
That's a good question because we haven't ever looked at it either. Besides salespeople, salespeople get their incentive on a monthly basis, and that's why it's an incentive. But we have never looked at it for hourly employees.
we have done that, and it is a nightmare to administer. And so we actually went back to annual. We threw it out last year simply because we couldn't keep up. And people just the managers did a poor job of trying to administer that and keeping track of it and setting new goals for, it just, so we dumped it. We just couldn't keep on top of it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Please help me thank our panelists today, Brett, Jessica, and Jason.